welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're going to explore the world of Jean Piaget and his theory of cognitive constructivism.
Oh, cool.
You want to understand how kids learn, and especially how this theory can be used in education.
Yeah, definitely.
So Piaget was like a detective when it came to figuring out how kids think.
Right.
He carefully observed children to see how they learn and grow.
Yeah, Piaget really changed our view of child development.
Yeah, how so?
Well, before Piaget, we kind of thought kids were just sponges,
Yeah.
passively soaking up information.
We're just absorbing everything around them.
Yeah, but Piaget showed us that it's much more dynamic than that.
Okay.
He revealed that children are actively building their own knowledge.
So they're not just empty vessels waiting to be filled.
Exactly, they're constantly interacting with their world to try to make sense of it.
That's so different from how most of us were taught, right?
It really is.
It's not just about memorizing facts. It's about actually constructing understanding through experiences. So how did Piaget figure this out? Did he hang out with kids all day and take notes?
He was very observant.
Okay.
He even studied his own children.
Wow. So he was really dedicated.
Oh, yeah. Through his careful observations, he began to see these patterns in how kids think and interact with the world.
Okay.
And from those observations, that's how he developed his theory of cognitive constructivism.
Okay, I see.
Basically, the main idea is that kids don't just passively receive knowledge.
Right.
They actively build it through their experiences and interactions.
So instead of picturing kids as empty containers waiting to be filled,
Yeah.
we should imagine them as little scientists,
Right.
exploring and experimenting and building their own theories about how things work.
Exactly. And, think about a toddler dropping a toy over and over again.
Yeah, they do that all the time.
It might seem like they're just playing, but they're actually engaged in a mini experiment.
Oh, that's interesting.
They're testing how gravity works and how objects behave, and they're gathering data to refine their understanding of the world.
That's a great example. It makes you realize there's so much more going on in those little brains than
Mm.
we often realize.
Definitely.
So how does this idea of active building play out as kids grow? Did Piaget figure that out too?
He did. He identified 4 distinct stages of cognitive development that children progress through,
Oh, wow.
from infancy to adulthood.
Okay.
And it's like a roadmap
Okay.
of how their thinking abilities evolve and transform over time.
A roadmap. That's a great way to think about it.
Yeah.
So where does this cognitive journey begin?
It all starts with the sensorimotor stage,
Okay.
from birth to around 2 years old.
Okay.
And it's a time of intense sensory exploration and motor development.
So like a baby fascinated by a soft blanket
Exactly.
or the sound of a rattling toy?
Right, they're using their senses to absorb information about the world.
That's amazing how much learning is happening, even in those earliest years.
Right.
Just through basic sensory experiences. But how do those early sensory experiences actually lead to more complex thinking?
Well, think about the game of peekaboo.
Oh, yeah.
It's not just a fun way to interact with a baby.
Right.
It's actually helping them grasp the concept of object permanence.
Object permanence. What's that?
It's the understanding that objects continue to exist even when we can't see them.
Oh, okay.
So before this concept develops, if you hide a toy from a baby,
Uh-huh.
it's literally out of sight, out of mind.
You just forget about it.
Yeah, peekaboo helps them learn that you haven't disappeared, you're just hidden.
Wow. So those seemingly simple games we play with babies are actually laying the foundation for some pretty complex cognitive abilities.
Absolutely. And as children move into the next stage, or the pre-operational stage, from around 2 to 7 years old,
Uh-huh.
we see language and symbolic thinking emerge.
Oh, that's interesting.
So they start to use words and images
Okay.
to represent objects and ideas.
So they're using symbols to understand the world.
Exactly. And this opens up a whole new world of imagination and make-believe.
This is when kids' imaginations really start to run wild, right?
Exactly.
Everything becomes a spaceship or a castle.
Right.
But I've also heard that kids in this stage can be pretty egocentric.
Yeah.
Is that related to their cognitive development?
It is.
Okay.
And egocentrism doesn't mean they're being selfish. It
Right.
just means they have difficulty seeing the world from anyone else's perspective.
Okay.
They kind of assume everyone sees and experiences things the same way they do.
So if you're enjoying a delicious snack,
Yeah.
a child in this stage might genuinely be confused
Yeah.
why you wouldn't offer them a bite even if they just ate.
Precisely. It's not about being rude.
Right.
It's simply that their cognitive abilities haven't quite developed to the point where they can understand different perspectives.
It makes sense when you think about it that way.
Yeah.
So what happens after the pre-operational stage? When do kids start to think more logically?
That shift begins in the concrete operational stage, from around 7 to 11 years old. And we start to see a significant increase in their ability to think logically.
Okay.
But their thinking is still tied to concrete experiences.
So they can understand that 2 + 2 = 4.
Right.
But they might still need to use their fingers to count it out.
Exactly.
And they can grasp the concept of conservation.
Yeah.
That the amount of something stays the same even if its shape changes.
Exactly. Think about pouring the same amount of juice into a tall, thin glass and a short, wide one.
Right.
A child in this stage will understand it's still the same amount of juice,
Even though the glasses look different.
even though the glasses look different.
That's fascinating. So they're starting to move beyond just appearances and
Yeah.
grasping those underlying principles.
Right. And finally, we reach the formal operational stage,
Okay.
starting around 11 years old and continuing into adulthood.
Okay.
And this is where those abstract thinking skills really kick in.
So this is when kids can start to think about like justice and fairness.
Exactly. They can think about concepts like justice, fairness, and morality.
Wow.
They can ponder hypothetical situations and think about the future in a more complex way.
So they're not just limited to what they can see and touch.
Right.
They can think about possibilities.
Yes.
Imagine different scenarios and even challenge the status quo.
Exactly.
It's amazing to see how far they've come from those early sensory explorations.
It really is. It highlights how cognitive growth happens throughout our lives.
Yeah, for sure. But let's bring it back to our main focus. Learning and education.
Okay.
How can educators actually apply these stages in the classroom?
One key takeaway from Piaget's theory is that children learn best when they can relate new information to what they already know.
Okay, so building on what they already know.
Right, and it's not just about filling their heads with facts.
Uh-huh.
It's about creating experiences that allow them to discover, experiment, and construct their own understanding.
So instead of just lecturing about ecosystems,
Yeah.
a teacher might have students build terrariums
Right.
and observe the interactions between plants and insects
Exactly.
and draw their own conclusions about how ecosystems work.
That's a perfect example.
I'm already starting to see how understanding these stages could be so valuable for teachers.
Yeah.
But we've only just scratched the surface of Piaget's theory, right?
Right. There's so much more to explore.
So much more to explore.
In our next segment, we'll delve into those dynamic cognitive processes we mentioned earlier, assimilation and accommodation.
Oh yeah, those sound interesting.
They're like the engine that drives learning.
I'm excited to learn more about that.
Yeah.
So stay tuned as we continue our deep dive into Piaget's cognitive constructivism
Okay.
and discover how it can empower us to create more engaging and effective learning experiences for children of all ages.
Sounds good.
Welcome back. We've been exploring how kids actively build their knowledge
Right.
instead of just passively absorbing information.
Yeah.
And now we're going to dive into what drives this learning process.
Assimilation and accommodation.
Yeah.
They sound kind of complex.
They're really just fancy terms for how our brains make sense of new information.
Okay.
So imagine your brain has these mental frameworks
Okay.
called schemas.
Schemas.
Think of them like mental maps that help you organize and understand the world.
Okay, so schemas are how we make sense of new experiences based on what we already know.
Exactly.
But what happens when we encounter something that doesn't quite fit into our existing schemas?
Right.
That's where assimilation and accommodation come in.
Exactly. Assimilation is when you encounter new information and can fit it into an existing schema.
Okay.
Think about a child who has a schema for dogs.
Yeah.
They know dogs have 4 legs, bark and wag their tails.
Well,
Now they meet a new breed of dog they've never seen before.
let's say it's a fluffy poodle, totally different from the golden retriever they know and love.
Right, they might initially be surprised by the poodle's appearance,
Yeah.
but because it still has those core dog features.
4 legs, barking, tail wagging. Yeah, they can easily assimilate it into their existing dog schema.
So assimilation is like adding a new entry to an existing category in our mental filing system.
Exactly.
But what happens when we encounter something totally new that doesn't fit into any of our existing categories?
That's where accommodation comes in.
Okay.
Instead of forcing the new information into an existing schema,
Right.
we have to adjust our schema or even create a whole new one
Okay.
to accommodate this new knowledge.
So it's like creating a whole new folder for
Yeah.
something completely different.
Think about that same child encountering a cat for the first time.
Okay, so it has 4 legs, but it meows instead of barking, and might hiss instead of wagging its tail.
Exactly.
Definitely doesn't fit the dog category.
Right. This new creature challenges their existing schema,
Okay.
and through observation and interaction,
Yeah.
they realize this is something different. A cat?
Huh?
They have to accommodate this new information.
By creating a whole new schema for cats,
Exactly.
distinct from dogs. But this isn't just a one-time thing.
Right, but
Our schemas are constantly being refined and updated throughout our lives.
absolutely. Learning is an ongoing process of assimilation and accommodation.
So we're always encountering new information,
Right.
adjusting our schemas and refining our understanding of the world.
Exactly.
I bet teachers can really use this knowledge about assimilation and accommodation to design better learning experiences.
Absolutely.
It's not just about presenting new information. It's about creating opportunities for kids to grapple with it,
Right.
challenge their existing schemas,
Yeah.
and build a deeper understanding.
Precisely. By understanding how these processes work,
Yeah.
educators can create activities that push students to accommodate, to really wrestle with new concepts.
Can you give me an example?
Yeah, imagine a science teacher introducing an experiment that contradicts students' existing ideas.
Like if they've always been told that objects float if they're lighter than water,
Yeah.
but then you do an experiment where a heavy object floats.
Exactly. That creates what Piaget called cognitive conflict,
Okay.
a challenge to their existing schema.
So they have to rethink what they thought they knew.
Right. They're forced to think more deeply, confront the misconceptions, and ultimately adjust their understanding.
So a little healthy confusion can actually be a good thing when it comes to learning.
Exactly.
It's through those moments of disequilibrium that we're really motivated to figure things out and deepen our understanding.
Precisely. And it's not just about individual exploration.
Oh, okay.
Piaget also recognized that social interaction plays a crucial role in shaping our cognitive development.
So we learn from each other.
Yes,
Yeah.
we learn so much from talking to other people,
Okay.
sharing ideas, and seeing things from different perspectives.
So it's not just about kids figuring things out on their own.
Right.
Bouncing ideas off each other, debating, and even disagreeing can actually help them learn.
Exactly. Think about a group of students working on a project together.
Oh.
They each bring their own unique schemas and perspectives to the table. Through discussion and collaboration,
Yeah.
they have to explain their thinking, listen to others' viewpoints, and maybe even revise their own understanding based on what their classmates share.
And those interactions can lead to that cognitive conflict we were talking about,
Exactly.
which can spark accommodation and deeper understanding.
Right.
Collaboration isn't just about teamwork. It's a key ingredient in the learning process itself.
Precisely. And this is where the idea of a constructivist classroom comes in.
Okay.
Piaget's theories had a huge impact on education, leading to a shift toward learning environments that emphasize active exploration, discovery, and social interaction.
So a constructivist classroom isn't about rows of desks with everyone silently taking notes.
Right.
It's about kids actively constructing their own knowledge through hands-on activities,
Yeah.
group projects, and meaningful discussion.
Exactly. What would that look like in practice?
In a constructivist classroom, the teacher isn't the sage on the stage,
Right.
lecturing and dispensing knowledge. Instead, they're more of a facilitator
Right.
or a guide on the side, creating the conditions for students to actively construct their own knowledge.
Exactly.
So instead of just telling kids about the water cycle, you might have them create their own mini water cycle models or
Wow.
design experiments to test their understanding of evaporation and condensation.
Exactly. It's about empowering students to take ownership of their learning.
I see.
They ask questions, explore, experiment, debate, and draw their own conclusions.
This sounds so much more engaging and dynamic than the way most of us experience school.
It is.
But does it actually work?
Well,
Do kids really learn better in this kind of environment?
research has actually shown that students learn more deeply and retain information better when they're actively involved in the learning process.
Makes sense.
When you're actively constructing your own knowledge, it's not just passively sitting in your short-term memory.
Right.
It becomes part of your long-term understanding.
I could see how that would be so much more powerful than just trying to memorize facts.
Definitely.
This has been such an eye-opening exploration of how kids really learn.
It is fascinating, isn't it?
We've seen how they actively build their knowledge through assimilation and accommodation, how social interaction sparks cognitive conflict and deeper understanding, and how constructivist classrooms can empower students to become active, engaged learners.
Absolutely. And in our next segment,
Okay.
we'll revisit Piaget's 4 stages of cognitive development,
All right.
delving into each one in more detail and exploring how they can guide us in creating effective learning experiences for kids of all ages.
Welcome back to our deep dive into Piaget's Cognitive Constructivism. We've been talking about how children actively build their knowledge through assimilation and accommodation,
Yeah.
and how social interactions can really spark those light bulb moments.
Like those aha moments.
Yeah, but now let's revisit those 4 stages of cognitive development that Piaget mapped out.
Okay.
It's like he created a roadmap
Uh-huh.
for understanding how kids' thinking changes and evolves as they grow.
Thinking of it as a roadmap is a helpful analogy.
Yeah.
Each stage represents a different way of understanding the world. A new set of cognitive tools
Okay.
that children develop as they interact with their environment.
So it's not just about accumulating knowledge.
Right.
It's about fundamental shifts in how they think and learn.
Exactly.
So let's start our journey back at the beginning
Okay.
with the sensorimotor stage,
yeah.
from birth to around 2 years old.
Right.
We've already talked about object permanence, but what else is going on in those amazing little brains?
Well, it's all about sensory exploration and motor development.
Okay.
Babies are like little scientists,
Yeah.
using their senses to gather data about the world. They're constantly touching, tasting, listening, looking, and smelling everything they can get their hands on.
Oh, yeah.
And as their motor skills develop,
Uh-huh.
they can interact with their environment in increasingly complex ways.
It's like they're laying the foundation for all future learning,
Right?
just through those early sensory and motor experiences.
Yeah.
What kinds of activities can parents and caregivers do to support this stage?
It's all about providing a stimulating environment
Okay.
with plenty of opportunities for exploration and interaction.
So, like, what kinds of things?
Think about toys that engage different senses.
Okay.
Textured balls, colorful rattles, things that make interesting sounds.
Things they can safely put in their mouths.
Right. And don't underestimate the power of simple interactions like singing songs, reading books,
Oh, yeah.
and playing peekaboo.
Right.
You're not just entertaining them,
Uh,
you're helping them develop crucial cognitive skills.
It's amazing how much learning is packed into those seemingly simple
It
interactions.
really is.
So when do we start to see those first glimpses of symbolic thinking and language development?
That starts to emerge in the pre-operational stage.
Okay.
From around 2 to 7 years old,
Uh-huh.
this is when kids' imaginations really take off.
Yeah.
They can use words and images to represent objects and ideas,
Okay.
which opens up a world of make-believe and pretend play.
It's like they're developing their own internal language
Yeah.
to understand the world.
Right.
But they're still pretty egocentric at this stage,
Yeah,
right?
that's right.
Seeing things from another person's point of view is still a challenge.
Yeah, it's important to remember that egocentrism isn't about being selfish or inconsiderate. It's simply a reflection of where they are developmentally.
Okay.
Their cognitive abilities haven't quite matured to the point
Oh.
where they can easily grasp another person's perspective.
So instead of getting frustrated when a child insists on doing something their own way,
Yeah,
we can use those moments as opportunities to gently guide them
right.
and help them develop those perspective-taking skills.
Exactly. It's all about patience, understanding,
Yeah.
and meeting them where they are developmentally.
Okay.
And as they move into the concrete operational stage,
Uh-huh.
from around 7 to 11 years old,
Yeah.
we start to see a real shift toward more logical and organized thinking.
This is when kids start to feel like they're really getting things right.
Yeah, exactly.
They can follow rules, solve problems, and understand concepts like cause and effect
Yeah.
in a more complex way.
They're still very much tied to concrete experiences, though.
Okay.
They need to see, touch, and manipulate objects
Right.
to solidify their understanding.
So this is where hands-on activities and manipulatives can be really helpful
Exactly.
in the classroom.
Yes.
So instead of just teaching kids about fractions through worksheets,
Right.
you might have them divide up pizzas
Uh-huh.
or use building blocks to represent different parts of a whole.
Exactly. By making learning tangible and concrete,
Yeah.
you're helping them build those foundational concepts in a way that makes sense to them.
It makes me wish my math classes had been a bit more hands-on.
Me too.
And finally, we arrive at the formal operational stage,
Okay.
starting around 11 years old
Yeah.
and extending into adulthood.
Uh-huh. This is where the abstract thinking really kicks in.
Okay.
Now, individuals can think about concepts that are not tied to concrete experiences. They can engage in hypothetical reasoning, ponder philosophical questions, and grapple with complex systems.
So they can think about things they haven't personally experienced.
Right.
and even imagine possibilities that don't yet exist.
Exactly. This stage marks a profound shift in their ability to think critically, solve problems creatively,
Yeah.
and even challenge the status quo.
It's like their brains have leveled up in a major way.
It is.
Yeah.
And while Piaget believed that most people reach this stage around 11 or 12, it's important to remember that everyone develops at their own pace.
Right.
And even within this stage,
Yeah.
there's a lot of individual variation in how people think and process information.
That makes sense. So how can we support kids as they enter this stage of more abstract and complex thinking?
It's about encouraging them to ask questions, challenge assumptions, and explore different perspectives.
It's really encouraging them to think for themselves.
Exactly. Give them opportunities to engage in debates, analyze complex issues, and come up with their own solutions to problems.
It sounds like this stage is all about fostering those higher order thinking skills
Right.
that are so crucial for success in school and beyond.
Exactly. Piaget's stages of cognitive development give us such a valuable framework
Yeah,
for understanding how children's thinking evolves over time.
it's amazing.
And by understanding these stages, parents and educators can create learning experiences
Yes.
that are tailored to each child's unique cognitive abilities and needs.
It's not about forcing kids into rigid boxes,
No.
but about meeting them where they are
Right.
and providing the right kind of support and challenges
Exactly.
to help them thrive.
Yeah,
This whole deep dive has been so insightful.
I agree.
I feel like I have a whole new understanding of how kids learn and how we can create learning environments that nurture their cognitive development.
What's truly remarkable about Piaget's work
Yeah,
is that it's still so relevant even decades after he first presented his theories.
I think so too.
It reminds us that children are not empty vessels waiting to be filled with knowledge.
Right.
They are active constructors of their own understanding,
Yeah.
driven by an innate curiosity and a desire to make sense of the world.
And by understanding the principles of cognitive constructivism,
Right.
we can empower children to become lifelong learners, equipped with the critical thinking skills
Yeah.
and problem-solving abilities they need to thrive in an ever-changing world.
We've covered so much ground today,
Yeah, we have.
exploring the key concepts, the 4 stages of development, and the practical implications for education. Hopefully you now have a deeper appreciation for the amazing ways in which children learn and grow,
I do.
and how we can create learning environments that nurture their incredible minds.
This has been an incredible journey through the fascinating world of Jean Piaget's cognitive constructivism. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, and we'll see you next time for another exploration of the latest ideas in learning and development.